The tears wouldn't stop coming. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the small airplane window in seat 12F, watching the clouds blur into watercolor streaks as American Airlines Flight 1847 climbed toward cruising altitude. 24 hours ago, she'd been defending her doctoral thesis on aeronautical engineering at MIT. Now she was racing home to Colorado Springs because her father, her hero, her everything, was dying. The call had shattered her world like glass. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the doctor had said with practiced gentleness. Maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks to say goodbye to the man who'd raised her alone after her mother died, who'd worked 3 jobs to put her through school, who'd never missed a single science fair or soccer game despite his exhaustion. Sarah clutched her phone, scrolling through old photos of her father. There he was at her high school graduation, beaming with pride in his janitor's uniform because he'd come straight from his night shift at Peterson Air Force Base. There he was teaching her to change a tire when she was 12, his weathered hands guiding hers with infinite patience. Everyone saw Miguel Chen as just another invisible worker pushing a mop through empty hallways. But to Sarah, he was everything. The man beside her in 12E kept glancing over with concern. "You okay?" he finally asked, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "My dad's dying. I'm trying to get home to see him." The words tasted bitter, unreal. The stranger's expression softened. He was maybe 40, with short graying hair and the kind of posture that screamed military. "I'm sorry." "That's rough." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "What's your dad's name, if you don't mind me asking?" "Miguel Chen. He's a janitor at Peterson Air Force Base." Sarah's voice cracked on the word janitor, not from shame but from the crushing realization that most people would never know how extraordinary an ordinary man could be. The man went completely still. His face drained of color, and his hand gripped the armrest until his knuckles went white. "Miguel Chen?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Did he serve?" Sarah nodded, confused by his reaction. "Vietnam. 2 tours. But he never talks about it. Says some stories are better left buried." The man was staring at her now with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "What was his call sign?" "His what?" "His call sign. Every pilot has one." Sarah frowned. "My dad wasn't a pilot. He was infantry. Ground troops." But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Her father had always been strangely knowledgeable about aircraft, could identify any plane by its sound alone. And those nights when he'd wake up screaming, calling out numbers and letters she'd never understood. The man pulled out his phone with shaking hands and scrolled through his contacts. "Mom, what did you say your name was?" "Sarah." "Sarah Chen." He found what he was looking for and showed her his phone screen. It was a military roster, dated 1972. Her breath caught. There, in black and white, was her father's name, Captain Miguel Chen, F-4 Phantom pilot, 8th Tactical Fighter Wing. And beside it, a call sign that made her world tilt sideways, Midnight Viper. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "He was never a pilot." "He would have told me." The man was already standing, moving toward the front of the plane with purpose. Sarah watched in bewilderment as he spoke urgently to the flight attendant, who immediately reached for the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Patricia Walsh speaking from the flight deck. We have a very special passenger on board today, and I'd like to share her story if she'll allow it." Every head turned toward Sarah, who felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She shook her head frantically, but the man from 12E was walking back down the aisle, followed by 2 other passengers, both with the same military bearing, both looking at her with something approaching reverence. "Mom," the flight attendant said gently, "these gentlemen would like to speak with you about your father." The first man sat back down, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "My name is Colonel James Mitchell, United States Air Force. I fly F-22 Raptors out of Langley." He gestured to the other two men. "This is Major Rodriguez and Captain Thompson. We're all heading to Colorado Springs for a training exercise." Sarah looked between them, utterly lost. "I don't understand." Colonel Mitchell leaned forward, his voice dropping to something just above a whisper. "Your father saved my grandfather's life in Vietnam." Captain Eduardo Mitchell, navigator. October 15, 1972, over the skies of North Vietnam. Major Rodriguez nodded. "My uncle, Staff Sergeant Antonio Rodriguez. Same mission." Captain Thompson's voice was thick with emotion. "My father, Lieutenant William Thompson, Weapons Systems Officer." Sarah's hands were trembling now. "What mission? What are you talking about?" Colonel Mitchell pulled out an iPad and opened a file marked Classified. "Operation Midnight Rescue." "Your father led a solo rescue mission behind enemy lines. 3 F-4 Phantoms had been shot down during a bombing run. 9 airmen were trapped in hostile territory with North Vietnamese forces closing in. Command wrote them off as lost." He scrolled through black and white photographs and aerial shots of jungle, wreckage, tiny figures on the ground. "Your father disobeyed direct orders and flew alone into enemy territory in a damaged aircraft. Call sign, Midnight Viper." He made 3 separate trips, taking heavy fire each time, pulling out all 9 men. Sarah's vision was blurring again, but this time it wasn't from sadness. "That's not possible. Dad would have told me." "He would have. He was court-martialed," Major Rodriguez said quietly. "Disobeying orders, even to save lives, is still disobeying orders." They stripped him of his rank, his wings, everything. The mission was classified, the records sealed. Officially, it never happened. Captain Thompson leaned forward. "But we remember. Our families remember." Every pilot in the Air Force worth his wings knows the story of Midnight Viper, how he risked everything to bring our people home. The flight attendant appeared beside them with a laptop. "The pilot would like to speak with you, Miss Chen." Sarah found herself staring at Captain Walsh's face on the screen, professional composure cracking around the edges. "Miss Chen, I've been flying for 23 years. I've heard the story of Midnight Viper since I was a cadet at the academy. Your father is a legend. He's the reason I became a pilot." The cabin had gone completely quiet. Passengers in nearby rows were turning to listen, smartphones appearing as words spread through the aircraft. Sarah felt like she was drowning in revelations that rewrote everything she thought she knew about her father. "Why didn't he tell me?" she whispered. Colonel Mitchell's expression was infinitely gentle. "Because heroes don't think they're heroes. They think they're just doing what anyone would do. Your father probably sees himself as a janitor who made some mistakes in Vietnam. He doesn't see what we see: a man who saved 9 lives at the cost of his own career." The plane's intercom crackled to life again. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have the daughter of a true American hero aboard our aircraft today. Captain Miguel Chen, call sign Midnight Viper, saved 9 airmen in Vietnam and paid the ultimate price for his courage. Miss Chen, from all of us here in the flight deck, and I'm sure I speak for every passenger aboard, we are honored to have you with us today." The applause started slowly, one person clapping, then another, until the entire cabin erupted in thunderous applause that seemed to go on forever. Sarah covered her face with her hands and wept for the father she'd never really known, for the hero who'd hidden behind a janitor's uniform, for the man who'd been extraordinary all along and never said a word. When they landed in Colorado Springs, Sarah found herself surrounded by a dozen uniformed officers who'd somehow materialized at the gate. Colonel Mitchell walked beside her through the terminal, talking quietly. "There's something else you should know. Your father's been quietly helping military families for years. Scholarships for kids whose parents were killed overseas, medical bills for veterans who fell through the cracks. He's been sending anonymous donations funded by, well, we're not sure how. His janitor's salary couldn't cover it." Sarah thought about all those extra shifts her father worked, all those nights he came home exhausted but somehow found energy to help her with homework. His other jobs, she realized. He told me he worked construction and landscaping on weekends, but he was probably working private security, consulting, anything to earn extra money to give away. Colonel Mitchell handed her a business card. "When you're eager and only when you're eager, there are a lot of people who'd like to properly thank your father and you." At the hospital, Sarah found her father exactly where she'd left him in her nightmare, so small and grey in a bed too big for his shrinking frame, machines beeping softly around him. He opened his eyes when she took his hand, and his face lit up with the same joy she'd seen in 1,000 photographs. "Meja," he whispered. "You came, Dad," Sarah said, her voice steady now, strengthened by everything she'd learned. "Tell me about Midnight Viper." For the first time in her life, she saw her father cry.